The Galactic Council had monitored the Forbidden Zone for over 12,000 years. Every species in the known universe understood one simple truth: nothing that entered the zone ever returned. The region of space stretched across 40 light-years of absolute darkness. Sensors failed there. Ships disappeared without trace. Even light seemed to bend and twist before vanishing completely. The ancient races called it the mouth of the void. The younger species simply called it death. Admiral of the Empire stood on the observation deck of his flagship. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the boundary markers that surrounded the zone. These massive stations had been placed here centuries ago to warn ships away. They broadcast constant signals in every known language. Turn back. Do not enter. There is no return. They had lost 17 exploration vessels to the zone over the... Each one had been crewed by their finest officers. Each one had sent back the same final transmission. Darkness, then silence. The council meeting had been called because of an impossible signal. 3 days ago, the boundary stations had detected something emerging from the zone. Not entering it, emerging from it. The data made no sense. Every scientist, every admiral, every leader in the galaxy had arrived to witness what they believed must be an error, was among the most skeptical. He had spent his entire career studying the zone. He knew better than anyone that nothing survived its depths. The signal grew stronger with each passing hour. The shape became clearer on their sensors. It was small, much smaller than the mighty vessels of the elder races. Its design was crude and angular. The hull showed massive damage. Entire sections had been torn away. Radiation burns covered what remained. The ship was barely holding together, but it was moving. Slowly and steadily, it was pushing through the boundary that had claimed countless lives. Representative Myra of the collective was the first to identify the vessel's origin. Her telepathic abilities allowed her to sense the faint life signatures within the broken hull. She turned to the assembled leaders with an expression of complete disbelief. The ship was human. A human vessel had entered the Forbidden Zone and was now returning from it. The chamber erupted into chaos. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. They had achieved faster-than-light travel barely 200 years ago. Their technology was primitive compared to the ancient races. Their ships were small and fragile. They were tragically short. The Council had watched humanity with mild interest, expecting them to remain a minor species for thousands of years. No one had anticipated this. Captain sat in what remained of her command chair. The bridge of the Artemis had been destroyed weeks ago. She now commanded the ship from a maintenance bay near the reactor core. Only 17 of her original crew of 200 remained alive. The others had been lost to the zone. Some had died when the hull breached. Others had vanished into the darkness itself, pulled away by forces no human science could explain. Had watched her friends disappear one by one. She had screamed their names into the void. The void had never answered. The mission had begun as a simple exploration run. The Artemis was designed for long-range surveys. Her job was to map unexplored regions and report back to Earth Command. No one had told to enter the Forbidden Zone. No one would have been foolish enough to give that order. But when she had received the distress signal, she had not hesitated. The signal had carried human voice patterns. Somewhere in that impossible darkness, humans were calling for help. The Council had never shared certain information with younger species. They had not told humanity about the ships that had entered the zone over 12,000 years ago. These were vessels from races that no longer existed, civilizations that had been wiped out by wars or disasters or the simple passage of time. But their ships remained in the zone, trapped in its impossible gravity. Their distress signals still broadcast after all these, echoes of the dead calling out to anyone foolish enough to listen. Had not known this when she crossed the boundary. She had believed she was racing to save human lives. By the time she understood the truth, it was too late to turn back. The zone had closed around the Artemis like a fist. The darkness was not simply the absence of light. It was something alive, something hungry. It pressed against the hull and whispered through the corridors. It showed the crew visions of their deepest fears. It promised them peace if they would only stop fighting. Most species who entered the zone surrendered within hours. The ancient records showed the same pattern repeated endlessly. Ships would enter full of hope and determination. Then the darkness would begin its work. The crews would fall into despair. They would stop eating. They would stop speaking. Eventually, they would stop breathing. The zone consumed everything, not through violence but through the complete destruction of will. Had refused to surrender. When the darkness whispered that she should give up, she had cursed at it. When it showed her visions of her dead crew members, she had screamed that she would see them again when she chose to and not before. When it promised her peace, she had laughed and said she would find her own peace by flying straight through its heart. The remaining crew had followed her example. Chief Engineer had kept the reactor running through 17 critical failures. He had rebuilt entire systems using parts salvaged from destroyed sections. Doctor had treated the wounded with supplies that had run out weeks ago. She had learned to synthesize medicine from ship components. Navigator Park had plotted their course through a region where no stars existed for reference. He had used mathematics that no one had ever attempted before. The zone had never encountered anything like them. The ancient races had accepted death with dignity. The elder civilizations had philosophically embraced the void. Humanity did neither. They fought. They argued. They complained. They made desperate repairs and told terrible jokes and refused absolutely to die. The zone had broken countless species. It could not break these strange, short-lived, impossibly stubborn creatures. Admiral watched as the human vessel finally crossed the boundary markers. The Artemis was barely recognizable as a ship. More than 60% of its hull was missing. Radiation leaked from a dozen breaches. The engines were operating at less than 5% capacity. By every measurement they understood, the vessel should have been dead. Its crew should have been dead. Nothing about its survival made logical sense. The Council demanded answers. They sent communication signals to the human ship. For several long minutes, there was no response. Began to wonder if the vessel was operating automatically. Perhaps the crew had perished and their ship had simply continued on its programmed course. Then a voice crackled through the speakers. It was rough and tired but unmistakably alive. Captain identified herself and her vessel. She apologized for her ship's appearance. She explained that they had experienced some difficulties during their journey. Several council members actually laughed at the understatement, then asked a simple question. Was there a station nearby where her crew could get something to eat? They had been living on recycled water and emergency rations for 6 weeks. She would appreciate a proper meal. The Galactic Council had existed for over 50,000 years. In all that time, no species had ever crossed the Forbidden Zone. The region had claimed tens of thousands of ships. It had ended countless lives. It stood as the ultimate proof that there were boundaries the universe did not allow any species to cross. And now, a human captain was asking for food recommendations. Representative Myra requested permission to board the Artemis. She wanted to understand how the humans had achieved the impossible. Agreed, but warned that the ship was not in ideal condition. Myra teleported aboard with a team of medical personnel and scientists. What she found changed her understanding of humanity forever. The interior of the Artemis was covered in writing. Every wall, every door, every surface had been marked with words. Some were names of fallen crew members. Others were messages of hope and determination. Many were simply crude insults directed at the darkness. The humans had literally fought back against the zone by refusing to remain silent. They had filled the void with their voices, with their memories, with their absolute refusal to be forgotten. The 17 survivors sat in a circle in the maintenance bay. They were thin and exhausted and damaged in ways that would take years to heal, but they were alive. When Myra asked them how they had survived, they looked at each other with expressions she could not read, then spoke. She said they had survived because they were too angry to die. The zone had taken their friends. It had tried to take their hope, but it had not understood something fundamental about human nature. Humans did not need hope to keep fighting. They could fight out of spite. They could fight out of stubbornness. They could fight simply because someone had told them they could not win. The Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss the implications of the human achievement. Some members wanted to celebrate the humans as heroes. Others wanted to quarantine them, fearing that whatever had allowed them to survive might be dangerous. A few suggested that humanity should be watched more carefully from now on. They had proven themselves capable of something no other species had ever accomplished. Admiral voted for recognition and assistance. He had spent his entire career believing the Forbidden Zone was unconquerable. He had thought the universe contained absolute limits that no species could surpass. The humans had proven him wrong. They had not defeated the zone through superior technology or ancient wisdom. They had defeated it by being too stubborn to accept defeat. Captain received a medal from the council. She accepted it with grace and thanked them for the food they had provided. When asked what she planned to do next, she smiled and said she intended to take a long vacation. Then she wanted to go back to exploring. There was still so much of the universe left to see. Several council members asked if she planned to avoid the Forbidden Zone in the future. Thought about the question for a long moment. She said probably yes, but she did not make promises. After all, someone might need help out there, and humans had never been very good at leaving others behind. The council did not know how to respond to this. They had lived for thousands of years following careful rules and respecting ancient boundaries. Humanity had existed for a mere of cosmic time, yet somehow these fragile creatures had already begun to change everything. The Artemis was repaired over the following months, visited her fallen crew members' families personally. She told them that their loved ones had died as heroes. She did not tell them about the darkness or the whispers or the endless nights of fighting just to survive. Some things were better left in the void. When the Artemis finally launched again with a new crew, stood on the bridge and looked out at the stars. The Forbidden Zone was behind her now, but she knew she would never truly escape it. The darkness had left marks on her soul that would never fully heal. She had gone into the void and returned. No one else in the history of the galaxy could say the same. The universe had learned something important that day. Humanity was not content to accept limitations. They did not respect boundaries simply because others feared to cross them. When the darkness came for them, they did not surrender or bargain or pray for mercy. They fought. They endured. They survived. And somewhere in the depths of the Forbidden Zone, something ancient and hungry had learned to fear the light of human determination. The stars waited ahead. Captain gave the order to proceed. The Artemis jumped to faster than light speed and disappeared into the unknown. Behind her, the Galactic Council continued to watch and wonder what these impossible humans would achieve next. They had already done what no one believed possible. Perhaps that was only the beginning.